Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Rise Urban Nation. I got my guy in the building. We finally made it happen. And when I say my guy, this is really my guy. Like he come from the same area. And I didn't realize that me and you come from the same area until we had that one conversation.
That's funny. I was like, how did I not know that? That's crazy.
Yeah, we're both from the DMV area. Wait, what part of the DMV area are you from?
So I'm from Maryland and PG County. So basically all over PG County. I lived most of my life sort of growing up.
Yeah, that's coming more DC now because I think all the people, don't DC don't beat me up. I'm paraphrasing here. They said they pushing all the people from Southeast over to PG County and all in that area now. So because they building up, they gentrifying Southeast San Diego. So not Southeast San Diego, Southeast DC. So
yeah, it's been interesting. I mean, like obviously growing up sort of around there, and a lot of the stuff they did near the stadium, and then like sort of obviously in Anacostia, kind of going down that whole corridor, even up. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's all the way up past over there, like Iverson Mall and Temple Hills, and some of the stuff that they're building up around there. So yeah.
Every time I go back, I was like, man, I remember when Chocolate City was Chocolate City. Now it's looking more like a chocolate chip cookie. But yeah, I spent a few years, just to elaborate on it because we didn't get a chance to go further into it. Like I grew up around Belford Towers, then we moved to DC area after we got out the Tacoma Park area. So I went to school in Maryland for a little bit, Langley Park Elementary School, Hollywood Elementary School, then over to High Point High School for a little bit. I don't know if you know that area.
Yeah. So I'm a little bit further south. So I grew up kind of around the Clinton area. Then we moved over to Forestville. I lived in Bowie for a little bit of time, then moved back over. At the time I spent in Upper Marlboro, Camp Springs, Temple Hills. So kind of a little bit of everywhere in sort of the PG County area.
What got you out the San Diego? I've been meaning to ask you that.
Yeah. So after I went to University of Maryland in College Park, and then afterward took a little bit of time, about a year off, and was trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And then I came out to San Diego for grad school. At San Diego State.
Yeah. And so just like myself, we came out here, we never looked back. Like palm trees, yep, check. Weather, check.
Yeah. It's funny because I was here for grad school, spent a couple years here, and then I moved back to the Maryland area and then actually lived in DC for about 5 years. And when I came back, I was like, man, why did I leave San Diego? Especially when it got cold and snowy. It's like, what was I thinking? Like, I don't know what I'm doing. And then so years later, I decided to come back out to San Diego.
So I didn't go back. I went back briefly just to help the parents out with some things, but like I knew this was because I didn't want a career. Like I feel like for me, either if you in the Black community, you have a decent career, it's either in politics out there, and I didn't want, or government. Like so. And ironically, I did not want to do any of that when I was there. So I was like, all right, this is not the life for me. So I'm gonna stay out here.
Yeah. It's definitely a lot of folks getting those government jobs early. And I got a lot of friends that are still around, and they work in sort of government jobs or contracting with the government.
Yeah. So you know. All right. So now that we vibed out for a little bit, for the people who don't know Alex Waters, who are you? Like, and you could go wherever you want to go with that question. You could give them the surface. You go a couple layers deep. I let you decide what you want to give to people. Who is Alex Waters?
Yeah, I mean this is a good question. And you definitely go a bunch of different ways. I don't know. At my heart, I'm just a person that likes collaborating with individuals to sort of build, whether it's programs, systems, organizations. That's kind of the biggest thing. And I think there's a trend line through everything that I've done that's been around that, right? And people used to ask me, well, how do you decide on what it is you do? And it's like, I really just like doing cool things with cool people. And that has been the biggest kind of piece with respect to, I guess, some of my interests and things like that. I studied philosophy. So I really like kind of thinking deeply about real challenging issues and different kinds of I don't know, answers, and some questions don't have answers, but really kind of taking that investigation to its furthest extreme. We already talked a little bit East Coast transplant. So here in San Diego, loving the sunshine. Yeah, I think that's kind of me in a nutshell.
Yeah, I would have thought you was like a business major or something of that
No,
nature, like or study
no,
like philosophy. Now, how
yeah,
does philosophy lends? How does that philosophy lends itself to the work that you do? Like how does that marry? Because I can see a little bit of it marrying. Like, but give me your take on it. How you blend it into the work that you do.
yeah. It's interesting. I think there's two real big things that it helps with. One is being able to look at a complicated problem that
Mm-hmm.
might not have a solution, and then being okay with just kind of investigating, going down sort of the rabbit hole, so to speak, to come to a solution, right? And you know that it might take a bunch of different twists and turns, but being okay with that and where you wind up sort of leading yourself to. And then kind of attached to that is really being able to kind of dig into the history of things. I think a lot of times there's sort of like this ahistorical context that people like show up and they think, okay, well, because I'm here in this particular point, nothing happened before me, and it's just from right now. And I think philosophy kind of teaches as you're kind of going back. It's like, they say, what no idea is original, right? And so there's always
Mm-hmm.
people out who are thinking about things, who are doing things, who are doing great work, whatever field it winds up being that you're in. It just, takes some time sometimes to kind of find what is that thing that you can apply and how you can kind of put a bunch of things together to come up with something that's going to work well. So that's how philosophy has kind of helped
Yeah.
me.
Now I can get the connection between philosophy and entrepreneurship because, I kind of fell into entrepreneurship about, 5 years ago in the startup scene. And then, I've been in love with the process, right? And I was telling somebody the other day, what I love about this out of all the jobs that I have that, this is all about the process and I'm in love with the process and it's always a process. Whereas other jobs, it's people fall in love with the outcome, so they chase the outcome
Mm,
and not get married to the process. And so, if you are trying to really build something great in entrepreneur, you have to be in love with the in the entrepreneurial world or startup world. You have to be in love with the process because that's going to take you on this journey that's going to eventually lead to an outcome. But you can't be married to that outcome before you fall in love with the process. Does that kind of make sense? I don't know. I know it sounds
yeah, yeah,
weird,
no,
but
no, very, very well said. Because I think anybody that's been around startups or small businesses or any level of entrepreneurship, um, where people think they're going to wind up is very, very different from where they wind up. Right. And it is that, sometimes it can be, depending upon what you're doing, depending upon where you are, a grind. And every day isn't awesome. But
Mhm.
that process of getting up every day and kind of getting to it and say, okay, well, whatever happened yesterday, okay, I'm going to build on that. And it might be a big build that day or a small build, or it might be a couple steps backwards, but continuing every single day to kind of move forward. I think that's an awesome thing. And yeah, when people fall in love with doing that and then building stuff, I think
Yeah.
those two things collectively really make great entrepreneurs.
Yeah, I love that. Now, what industry would you consider yourself in? Because I know you a little bit in the nonprofit world, you're a little bit in the startup world. I feel like you're a little bit in entrepreneurship, a little bit in tech. Like, what do you call this industry that you in, or are you in a little bit of all of it? Like, how do you define this?
Yeah, I don't really know. I still have to like to describe the people who know me really well. They're like, "What do you do?" Like, I don't really quite understand like what are the parts of what you do, and like how do you have this part over here, and you work with these different companies across different spaces. Um, I think it goes back to kind of the core. Like what I do is just really trying to collaborate to build something bigger than what exists right now and bigger than sort of myself. So it's like, how do
Mm,
you work with different people to be able to, produce a result that is going to be beneficial for all parties involved? Yeah, so that's how I would describe it. But I think you're right. There's a little bit of a little sprinkle here, a little sprinkle there, kind of, and it kind of
yeah.
fuses all together.
Yeah, because somebody was asking me like, what, like, I know, what does he do again? I was like, you know what? I'm gonna ask him when I interview him because I know he does a little bit of this, but I don't know what. It's like, well, what industry is he in? I was like, I don't know. I don't know what to call it. I don't know if because he's in a lot of different things.
Yeah.
Like I told him, it's almost like what's homeboy from Martin. Everybody knew he had a job, but they never knew what he did.
Yeah. Tommy. It's like, what do you do?
He's Tommy.
Yeah. Yeah.
So hey, take me on this journey of how you got into this space to where you're at right now as a philosophy major. Like, how did you get here? Like, what was the journey like? Give me the story behind that.
Yeah. So it kind of started. So I was in school. I was doing stuff, obviously philosophy when I was an undergrad. Took some time off and had always thought about doing stuff, maybe business. I had a buddy of mine who was a writer, and we had always talked about maybe we should do like a magazine. And like back in the day, I was like glued to the Source magazine when that was out. Like that was like you get it in the cover, you read it 7,000 times the same one until you get the next one the next month. We had talked about doing something like that. So there's always these kind of inklings. I had a cousin. We talked about doing like a comic book and all these. So there was different kinds of things that popped up that sparked like, oh, it could be cool to sort of like, own something or own a business or work. My dad had actually kind of dabbled a little bit into owning his own business. He had like this picture framing company and, the ups and downs of sort of that as well. And then when I came out to San Diego, I kind of got a little bit around people who were doing a little bit of that at a very, very slight level. Then I moved back to DC and got into just by happenstance. I thought I was actually going to like be at this company for like 6 months and then like go travel the world. I was planning on teaching English someplace. And it was an ed tech startup. And I got there. There were about 50-ish people, a couple different offices. And by the time I left, there were like 1,200. The company had IPO'd. So I saw on the inside of like what it looks like when a company is scaling and growing and the ups and the downs. And because of the position that I was in, the department I was in, which is the student services, they built, just to give you a little background, they built basically master's and doctoral programs for universities. But
Wow.
we were the first group, first sort of university that they partnered with, which was USC. And so I saw a lot of it. I got to, know personally a lot of the executives. And so you saw a little bit behind the business side of what they were doing, how they were talking, how they did deals, these different kinds of things. Then moving out to San Diego, it really kicked into overdrive. And I started really getting involved in sort of the startup community, the 1 million cups, startup weekend, startup week, just kind of being everywhere. Right? People like, hey, there's an event over here. Cool. I'll go check it out. Like, and that's really what kind of got me sort of on this pathway into working with, businesses and from like the tech space to sort of the small business space over the years. So it was really just,
I love it.
Showing up and being places, right? And just curious about how things worked and tried my hand at an ed tech startup with a co-founder, did everything wrong you could imagine with respect to sort of trying to get that off the ground. And that was really, like I said, really cemented like, oh no, this is the space I'm going to be in. I really want to work in sort of entrepreneurship and around entrepreneurs.
Nice. I love it. So in retrospect to that, like when you look at that journey, what's one good lesson life has taught you in that journey of all those ups and downs, the mistakes you made or you see made in the startup when it comes to, startup life, entrepreneurship, or if you want to even give like a personal type of allude to, one good life lesson that works too. Was something that you really learned in that journey?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is just being curious, showing up. That's one of the biggest things, especially, when you are going into spaces where, just to be perfectly honest, like there might not be a lot of people that look like you, right? Might not be a lot of people have your background or anything, but like having to overcome that, whether it's anxiety or worry that you're not going to sort of be a part of or fit in. I think just being there, being in the spaces affords a lot of opportunity because, this is, same as I do in like a space like San Diego, while when you first start out, you might not know people, it
Mhm.
doesn't take that long before you start seeing the same people everywhere, all of the time, the same events, the same stuff. And that leads you to build relationships with people, right? You build these relationships. Oh, hey, what are you up to? Or what are you up to? Hey, how can we, connect? Or, oh, hey, I heard about this thing you might be interested in. The other day I sent a buddy of mine a link to this program about venture capital because I was like, hey, I saw this. You might be interested in it. I met him through doing those kinds of things and being in different spaces. So I think just really showing up, right? Just going. If you're curious about something and you want to know about something, take the time. It's not always convenient, so you have to make time for it. A lot of times, after work, you might not feel like going to a startup event or a mixer. You're like, I'll get it. Just take the time and go. And I think people find that a lot of folks are receptive, or a lot of people are in the same boat, right? You might think that everybody there is established and knows everything about everything. And a lot of times you get there and it's just like, somebody else is like, hey, this is my first time at this event too. And I don't really know anybody and I'm not sure I want to do this. But, and you find a lot of camaraderie in that when you go into those spaces.
Yeah, I love that. Just showing up and just being places, backstory. I don't think I've ever told you this, but during my San Diego Workforce Partnership days, I remember we was doing a youth program, and it was some funding coming down from the mayor's office, and I was out in the community doing some work. I can't remember who I was talking to, but it's like, oh, you know who you need to connect with? You need to connect with Alex. And then I think I heard that twice, but I hadn't met you yet. And it wasn't until after I left San Diego Workforce Partnership that I met you at the startup weekend, and I was like, oh, that's Alex. So it's true what you say about just showing up, because like sometimes, just showing up, people get to know you and then your name get mentioned in rooms your feet probably haven't even touched. And so like I heard your name
Yeah.
twice before I actually got the chance to meet you in person.
Yeah. I mean, it's
So
a big thing. I tell everybody like, just go and be around. And then the other thing I would add to that, which I think, you do an amazing job of this, is just being open to helping out, right? A lot of times people are looking for, well, now I'm not going to volunteer for that thing because that's going to take me a bunch of time and I can't see what the exact result is going to wind up being right now. But a lot of times when you volunteer for events or to help out or to even organize stuff, right? That's a big one. I mean, I got, kind of a lot of opportunity to be around stuff. But then somebody was like, hey, you want to host a startup weekend event? And I was like, oh man, I don't know. That seems like that's going to be a lot. But going through that process and doing it, like you meet all of these people and different mentors and coaches and orgs. And so it's a lot that comes from that. If you're just willing to kind of, take some time and really do it.
because I mean, even to your point, that first startup weekend I attended, I wasn't in that space. I think it was somebody that was doing the event, and then somebody who was a Google rep. They say, "Hey, we're trying to get more Black and brown people here. You've been doing these programs in the community. Like, could we just market through you, and then could you share it with?" And I was like, "Sure, I'll do it." And they was like, "Come to the event. Like, you've been helping us promote it." I was like, I don't know anything about startup world or tech stuff. There's like, oh, you know more than what you think. And then I attended. I was like, oh, we do that in the nonprofit world, but it's not called that.
Yeah, exactly. There's so much of that where people are like, oh, well, I don't know about this or that. It's like, it's the same thing. It's just in a different packaging, in a different sort of area or environment.
Yeah. So let's say you meet somebody who gets inspired by this, or is a young. I'm gonna do two ways. Let's start with the young kid first. The young kid coming out of college, they hear your interview, they're inspired. They want to journey down this career pathway similar to yours. Like, what's some advice you would give to somebody like that?
Yeah, I mean, I would say do the things that really inspire you. I know there's a whole piece about sort of people say, well, you got to find the thing that is your passion and I agree with that to a certain degree, right? There's still things where you have to be able to work and be able to live and do these things. And so that's really important. But if you can find things that really kind of, inspire you and you're excited about doing, it comes through. It shows up. So for folks that really want to do things, it's like, hey, I'm curious about this thing. I really like doing this thing. And I do this even though I'm not getting paid for it. If you can find some of those things and slowly start to dip your toe in the water with however much time you have, start going down that pathway. Because it's not an accident that when you see, a lot of folks and a lot of successful people, and they talk about when they first started out, and then they start naming individuals who they know, and all of those people at the same time are sort of rising through the ranks and doing things. But you have to be able to go out and sort of just do those things that, like I said, that inspire you. The other thing I would say is, and I wish I had done this when I was a bit younger. I did it to a degree because, I think getting a degree in philosophy was not, I don't think, what anyone had planned when I had gone to school. It's like, hey, I'm going to get a degree in philosophy. People are like, what are you going to do with that? Like, what kind of job can you get? I don't, what are you gonna do? Like, so there was a portion of sort of betting on myself, but I would say, look, bet on yourself, right? Like, if you're willing to put the work in, I think for most people, they'll get a great outcome from just betting on yourself, saying, hey, I want to do, business, or I want to be a writer, or I want to, whatever it is, be a pilot, or I want, like, just bet on yourself and be willing to put the work in as you are continuing to move forward. I think is the biggest piece of advice that I've gotten from afar from people that has really served me well.
Right. To that, when did you really start leaning into that of like, going forth with just, doing the things that inspire you and you're curious about, and really betting on yourself? Like, when did you start doing that work? And like, how did you begin the process of becoming more comfortable with doing that? Or what helped you solidify that as your kind of mantra as you started to maturing and get,
Yeah.
to where you're at now?
It was actually is sort of a couple of events kind of dovetailed together. So I was working at the ed tech company. I was kind of rising up the ranks. I had a lot of responsibility, was building things, learning a lot. And then there were a couple incidents there around sort of like I didn't really feel like I was appreciated for the work that I was putting in, and it kind of became apparent to me that, like, man, wait a minute, this doesn't feel right anymore. And so basically I went in and I had a plan. I had saved up some money, and I told them I was moving. I'm like, I'm moving to San Diego. And the company was like, what do you mean you're moving to San Diego? I was like, I'm moving to San Diego. If this job is available for me to keep, that's cool. But if not, then I'm just moving. And I had saved up a little bit of money. And so I was like, okay, I'll be good for some time. But if I need to, I'll just work. Like, I've been working since I was 15. I've had all kinds of different jobs. I don't have any issues with, working. I worked at department stores. Even when I was in grad school, I left for a bit. I worked at a hotel front desk. Like, I didn't have any issue with sort of starting again. And I think that was the piece that where it really clicked, where I was like, okay, yeah, that's fine. I'll be okay. I'm going to be all right. Regardless of what I do, I'm going to be okay. And I think that was the real part where it was like, yeah, whatever I decide to do, I'm going to be okay. It might take me a while to get to where I want to be, but that's okay. As long as I got a roof over my head.
And look at you now, sir. Look at you now. That gives a good intro to, like, because I often tell people, like, it's not where you start, it's how you finish. And then sometimes people feel like as soon as they get out of college, they have to land that that job that they're supposed to land. It doesn't always happen like that. And everybody, mostly everybody has humble beginnings. Some people may not, but for the most part, nobody starts off with the dream job or that entry level career job. What was your first job? Just to go back and give everybody that mental caption, because I know you said you're not a stranger to working the 9 to 5. Yeah. So what was your first job?
So first job as like a kid or when I got out of school?
First W-2 job ever.
My first WC job ever. I was actually a telemarketer.
Get out of here.
Yeah, yeah. I was a telemarketer. Um, I was working at this company, and it was like basically how you would envision sort of a telemarketing space. I was trying to get a job. I was at high school. You fill out applications. I filled out applications everywhere. The grocery store, fast food places, and I couldn't I couldn't find anything. And then a buddy of mine found this gig, and they were paying, was it $5.50 an hour? And it was more than people were paying because I think the other jobs were like $5.15. I was like, yes, I want that. I showed up, talked to them. They're like, yeah, sure, you can work. And we literally called people to see if they wanted to refinance their homes. And that was the first job that I got where I was like working. I'd go after school. I'd walk to it on weekends, and that was my first sort of real kind of job.
Wow. I would have never guessed that. But,
Yeah.
now that you're talking, I can see that telephone voice. You may have called me a couple. No, just kidding. No. What's some things that you learned from that first job? Was there any lessons that you feel that you took away from that first job of what you want to do or don't want to do?
Yeah. I mean, so one of the biggest lessons that I took away from it was that, like, even though you may not want to do something or you may feel a little nervous about doing something, most of the times it's not as bad as you have made it out in your head. I was like, man, I gotta call people, and I'm like bothering people. It's in the evening, they're eating dinner. Like, this is gonna be awful. People are gonna be like angry and mad, and you just realize in that particular case with telemarketing, it was like, you make your calls, and and then the first time you get somebody that's like, okay, that's interesting. Yeah, here's my information. You're like, what? Wow, you gave me your information? Like, this is amazing. And you do the whole thing, and but yeah, I think a lot of times it's what people are fearful of. It's way worse in their head than sometimes what's going to wind up being, especially in the context of a job, right? So whether somebody's trying to make a sale, or they're doing some outreach, or they're trying to, connect with an organization to help with what they're doing. Like, a lot of times people have that, and that, I think at a young age, taught me that. It's like, yeah, you can do this.
Yeah.
Like, you can do this, and you just got to keep at it.
Yeah. I think fear is often one of the crutches that often keeps a lot of people in the spaces that they're in, and they don't overcome. But since we're here at Rise Urban Nation, I like to put a new meaning to fear, and I use this acronym. I can't remember where I got it from, but it stands for fear: face everything and rise.
I like that. I love that. That's awesome.
Rise. Yeah. So don't let the fear cripple you. Like, don't run from the pain and fear. Run toward it. And then there's going to be a valuable lesson in there that you can learn, and you can use that to catapult to the next stage of life, wherever that may be, left or right.
Oh, yeah.
And that's often what entrepreneurs do. They're like, look, we gotta tackle the problem. We gotta go full steam ahead so we can find a solution that gets us to the next stage.
Yeah,
wherever that may be.
And a lot of times, like you were saying before, like you don't know where that is going, right? You just know I gotta start moving this way, and you may have to double back and go the other way later on, but you just have to kind of move forward. Be like, okay, I got to take care of this one thing now, and hopefully, the pathway will, present itself, and it'll be much clearer as you kind of keep moving forward. That's a great acronym. I like that.
Thank you. So let's go the other way with it. Let's say you meet somebody who's in that dead end job. They've been in it for a minute. They don't like it. This telemarketing thing ain't for me. But we talking all this mumble jumble here. They're like, all right, let me see. What can I get into? I like what Alex been talking about. I've been seeing him doing some stuff in the community. Him and Terrell. I'm trying to hit in that wavelength. What's some advice you give to somebody like that?
To one, reach out to people. I've done a few different podcasts. I speak places. I give people freely my cell phone number and email address. Reach out to the individuals that you wind up seeing that you say, hey, I might want to do that. Right. I think people are surprised by how willing people are to give them information and details, right? Like just something quick where it's like, hey, can I meet with you? Sure. I'll take some time. Like we can chat, we can chop it up, like, and just talk about, okay, well, this is where my realm is. If you're interested in this, then you might want to do these 3 or 4 things. And then here, talk to this person, go here and chat with this individual. But a lot of times people won't do it. And I think it goes back to kind of that fear thing again, right? I know me personally, when I was younger, the same kind of thing, right? People would offer like, yeah, come by and talk to me, or, come to my office and chat. I'd be like, I'm not going to do that. Like, I don't know what to say. I don't have a pitch down. I don't really know. Like, and a lot of times it is really people are trying to help just give you some information, because then you can make that determination for yourself, whether it is something that you want to do. And I've been really lucky. There's been a lot of great people over the course of my lifetime who have just, taken the time. And then I really got hip to it when I was going into grad school, where my entire demeanor shifted, where it was like, oh no, you got an office hours. I don't have anything to talk about. So I'm going to show up outside your office. And then if there wasn't a student that was there that like had an actual thing with a class or whatever, I would just sit down and be like, okay, how did you get to where you are? I don't know if this is what I want to do or not, but I'd love to hear your story, and I'm paying for it. So you got some time to chat with me. So I would do that a lot. And that really helped sort of me get more information and details. And I carried that on into when I started working in companies. I was just, what do you do? How, like, what is that? What does that day to day look like? And then I could start to figure out, actually, that doesn't sound great. I don't really think I want to do that. Oh, this sounds really cool over here. Okay. Are there ways that I can learn more? Is there a book that you would recommend I read? Is there some event that I can go to that you think that would work well for me to start to learn more about it, and just gather as much information as possible? And then that helps you make that decision, so you don't feel like you're just kind of, jumping out with no information whatsoever. You're like in a job you don't like. Okay, well, I want to be an accountant. Well, if you don't know anything about being an accountant and you're not an accountant right now, it is going to be really scary if you're just like, okay, I'm quitting my job and I'm going to go be an accountant. It's like, well, what are the steps? What are the stages? How can you sort of formulate a plan to be able to do it?
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And I must say, I'm gonna give Alex kudos here. I love to give people their flowers when I see him. He's been that dude in the community that anytime you need something, and he got it. He's willing to give you advice. Man, when me and Louis won Startup Weekend, Luis Martinez, I remember us connecting with you at a coffee shop. I don't know if you were there already or how that happened. I think we were just passing through, and we saw you. And you gave us a whole bunch of free game, and we were able to use that to move the needle on some things. Even now, when we reconnected, I was like, yo, I gotta interview you and all your black entrepreneurs. He was like, yes, let's make it happen. I was like, okay, that was easy.
Yeah. Like I said, I think a lot of times, I often tell this, and I tell this to entrepreneurs as well, right? And you know this because you do a lot in terms of helping people and giving back. People who do that and who want to do that, it's not because it's like, oh, well, I'm doing it because I hope I get something back. It's like, hey, I really like being able to be like, hey, I learned this thing, and like, hey, can I share it with someone, right? And that's a great feeling to be able to help someone along the way, even if it's just a little small thing, tell them about some little event or something here. Can really be awesome, and it's a good feeling, right? Like people do it because it's like, hey, it's a great feeling to be able to like, oh, I learned this thing. Hey, you should really know this thing because it might help you, might not, but I really want to share it with you. And so when we don't ask for help, or when we don't ask people about stuff, we actually are eliminating them the opportunity to be able to partake in it. I heard a great interview. I forget the founder's name, but it was one of the guys who founded LegalZoom. And he was saying a lot of people, when they're starting their business, and this is an interesting case because obviously he had some family that had some money that could invest, and that's not everybody's scenario. But he was saying that the thing that was interesting was, it's like a lot of people don't ever want to go to people who are close to them to sort of ask for help. Especially with like businesses or different kinds of things like that. He was like, but what if you're eliminating the opportunity for them to also be a part of your journey and be a part of the success that you have when you get to where you want to get to. And I was like, wow, that's a really interesting thing to think about, right? Like you might be removing that opportunity for somebody who really is excited or wanting to help or wanting to do something that's going to help somebody along the way, and be a part of the journey that someone's taking.
Yeah, that is so true. And I think when you allow people to the option to be opt in and be a part of the journey, they not only do they receive growth from it, but you get to grow with that individual together. So you don't have to go back and reach for the person because they're right there in the journey with you, right? And
Yeah,
so I love that. I love that thought. And it builds up the community. It builds up the tribe, the village. You want to have,
absolutely.
the people around you who can have the mindset to help you get through those different obstacles that you may face, or at least be in that same wavelength.
100%. I
Yeah.
completely agree.
So, I'm looking at the San Diego landscape because I see so much going on. I feel like you're the right person to tap into this. I see the biotech space really about to take off. They building this whole massive center downtown. I'm seeing more I think tech people come in to San Diego. It looks like the old Bay Area tech people are just, some people just getting tired, it's too expensive, whatever. And they're starting to make their way out here. What do you think the future looks like for San Diego when it comes to this startup and tech thing that we got going here?
I think there's just a lot of opportunity. So you're right. There's an immense amount of money that is dumping into biotech, even bigger startups. The way that it's working with the capital markets is there's so much money, like they can't figure out like exactly where to put it. And so that's why you keep hearing about these funds, and the funds are getting larger and larger and larger and larger. Even people who have never raised funds before they might have started with, a $5 million thing. And now it's like, oh, we raised $50 million to invest in businesses. And there's a lot that people are looking to deploy kind of capital wise. But I think that there's some interesting ways to take advantage of that, in things that aren't, I would say, sort of like ancillary to the specific kind of thing, right? So somebody might say, okay, well, there's a biotech company, and that biotech company is, well, I'm not into biotech. I do manufacturing. It's like, okay, well, do you manufacture stuff for biotech companies? Because that might be a good space to sort of move into, if you know that the region itself are doing things, right? I was talking to somebody the other day, and this is was related to like, being sort of more ecologically friendly and things like that. And they were saying, well, the science industry is never going to get away from plastics because you need pipettes and all these different kinds of things and petri dishes and all these. And you think about that, but like, sure, the $1 billion company is there, but they're buying stuff from somebody, right? They're buying these things from individuals. They're purchasing stuff so I think a lot of times what happens with the tech space is it's important, but there's a lot of things that are around a lot of those tech spaces that wind up being really interesting, and the entry points to getting into those things is not as high as it needs to be for you to start your own biotech company. But you can create businesses that are going to be very successful, that are a part of the sort of system as a whole. And I think that's a really interesting thing to think about. And then also getting in on the sort of the wave of being able to build without having to have that massive technological barrier of needing to be, this high flight coder to build stuff. Like there are so many tools out now to be able to put something together that you can work, that you can figure out stuff, you can create, so many people use things like Shopify, where it's like before, how much money it would have cost you to develop your own e-commerce store and deal with all these different kinds of things. And like, nope, I don't have to do that. I can go literally, take a low cost class, or Shopify even does their own trainings now because it helps them with money that comes in. So I think there's a great amount of opportunity that's here in San Diego, and it's starting to move into some different spaces. You have the biotech now. The software is becoming a bit bigger. You have what I think is actually a really interesting space that is massively untapped, which is like logistics and transportation, warehouses. Like, we don't think about all the stuff that actually comes into the country through San Diego. But if you go to Otay Mesa, like there's tons of warehouses out there. There's tons of stuff, trucks moving back and forth. I used to catch a train back from LA. I was doing some work up there, and like you would see these trains full of cars that are coming up because they, produce them down at Mexico and then they bring them all the way up to LA and different. Like there's so much stuff sort of in that space, but it's not it's for a lot of people, it's not as exciting as. Hey, I built an app that will do something. It's like, oh, well, yeah, well, you're just in like trucking. It's like, yeah, okay, well, that's a space that is going to rapidly need new systems and new ways to do things that are much more efficient. Because when you look at some of those spaces, they're still doing, paper and pencil or pen, whatever, and logbooks to be able to do stuff, right? And so if you can figure out ways to, get a little slice of that, it's a great opportunity for folks.
So true, so true. And then if you couple that with what's been happening in the market lately, that the supply chain market where things getting stuck at ports, the crates are more expensive now. For shipping and shipping costs and expenses. So you have to really be strategic about your order placement, what orders you need. The raw material parts that you need to get over here, because that all inflation and backlog has caused a whole disruption in the game for everybody. So if anybody can find their way into the game, just that slither, whoo, like I think you wanted something there. So that's that philosophy mindset working, huh? Another thing I do like that you point out too, which is a great point, is it just when you look at what it used to cost for just the e-commerce platforms and all that stuff, the point of entry is much more or less expensive and more attainable. And I think a lot of people don't realize and recognize that, especially people who are not in the industry like we are. Shout out to one of our sponsors, Taylor Brands. Like I remember when I found out how much their website and the whole business setup, they got everything from the LLC to the trademark, everything. You could do everything through their site. And the cost of it, I was like, wait, this is it? Like, that's all it costs? I was like, man, this is nuts. Like, how are y'all affording this? And so the entry level is just, it's a very low barrier entry point than it was before. So people, if you have great ideas, start chasing that idea and see how you can make it into reality. You'd be surprised on what you can make happen, and then the amount of opportunities and funding that's out there that could really turn that idea, that passion, into a dream. So and the programs are out there.
And one thing I'm sorry, I was talking to somebody the other day, and this is one thing that I really think is important. A lot of times, especially this sort of phrase, lifestyle business. It's almost like when people hear it, especially around the tech space, they kind of look down upon it, right? And they say, oh, well, yeah, that's just fine. But you're building like a little lifestyle business. And it's like, well, $1 billion companies are very rare. I know people hear about them all the time, but they're still amazingly rare based on all the different kinds of companies that happen. And if you build a business that affords you the lifestyle that you want, why is that a bad thing? Like, why is that looked at as like a negative kind of thing? And it's pretty prevalent in sort of the startup space where people will be sort of dismissive of, if you're not trying to build, a company that's going to be worth, $40 billion, that it's not important. But if you build a company that's worth $1 million, that's really impressive, right? Like, and I think the hope over time is that we sort of like normalize just people having success. Right. Like, and whatever form that winds up taking and whatever shape that is. So while there's a lot of opportunity, sure, if you want to go build an empire, awesome. Take what you can and go build it. But if you want to build a business where you're able to take care of yourself and your family, and you have some employees and you take care of them and you treat them well, like, that should be looked at as like an amazing thing, and we need more people to want to be able to do that as well.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I know plenty of, quote unquote lifestyle companies that average an income of $500,000 or less, or maybe like even like a simple one that operates on 250,000 and may have two employees, and the rest are like just subcontract work just to work on little
Yeah,
things within their business, and it forces them the lifestyle to live an amazing life, an abundant life where they can travel, they can get off when they want to get off, and they can do the things they want to do. And I don't think there's no shame in that. Like, if my business was at that level, I'd probably be there. But no, actually, I'm passionate about helping the community. So I mean, I'll still be living the lifestyle, but I'll
yeah,
still be out in these streets doing stuff. So
yeah.
I probably won't as vacation as much as other people, but because I'm still doing the things that I love, which still affords me the
Yeah,
lifestyle that I want, right?
yeah, absolutely. I
Yeah,
think it's that's one big thing that I want to be able to say more through any of the times I talk to people or with the entrepreneurs that I work with. It's like we have to get this idea out of our heads that it's like $1 billion company or bust, right?
but,
That's if that's what you want to do and that's where you want to go, great. But if you don't, then having success is really about what people feel for themselves as success, not what someone externally says you're supposed to because you're in a startup space or you're building a business.
why do you? Where do you think that comes from? Where does that culture come from? Of like, you have to raise this money, you have to sell at this round. Where does that culture come from? Like, I don't even know how that even got started or how that became a thing.
Yeah, I mean, so a part of it is, the mechanisms of how sort of venture capital works,
uh,
where if I invest in you and I give you $500,000 and I need a 10x return or a 20x return, then yeah, you got to grow your company to be really large.
yeah.
But I think what's happened is a lot of folks are sort of veering into that venture capital space where they have no intention of ever wanting to do that, right?
Hmm.
I mean, it sounds good on paper, but a lot of people would never want to have 1,000 people that work for them. That's not something that everybody wants, right? And
Hmm.
so if you don't, then sort of right sizing the expectations around what it looks like in terms of how capital works and how people are looking for it. So I think that's one of the things that kind of sometimes people aren't really aware of exactly how it works. Where it's like, yeah, if I borrowed money from somebody else, basically, which just happens in VC, and
Hmm.
they're already wealthy and they could just stick it in the stock market and get 8% returns for 10 years. But I tell them I'm going to give them greater returns, that I need to push you to be able to build a really big business and sell it or IPO it so I can get my money and give them their money back. Because if I just give them the half a
Hmm.
million that they gave me 10 years ago back, I've lost them money. And that's
Hmm.
not a space that people want to be in. But again, I don't think a lot of times it necessarily gets explained in that kind of way to
Hmm.
people who are looking for investment. It's like somebody gives you investment,
Yeah.
unless it's a person who just is a family member doesn't care about their money. They want a sizable return back, and so there's certain things you have to do to be able to get that. Um,
Yeah. I do think this the new economy that we're in now with the increase of inflation, the way the stock market's going, is and then looking at diversity, equity, inclusion in the VC space is causing us to hopefully it's everybody's starting to have new conversations on you know uh, uh, having a healthier culture around this, because I don't think the way of 10x returns is the sustainable way to really go anymore. We have to start looking at 10x returns in 3 to 5 years. That's going to be nearly impossible, especially in this market. So either if you're trying to get those type of numbers to even get to 7 and 8, you might have to hold a couple more years, or when can we normalize 2 to 3x returns, and have healthy growth and have diversity in the company and have like all these different things that really help companies thrive and sustain in the long run, right? When can we
yeah,
start having those conversations?
Yeah, I mean, and they're starting a little bit, and you have companies that invest in groups and organizations that is around sort of like stakeholder capitalism and these cooperative models of investment that say, hey, look, the return is not specifically in monetary amounts, right? It's in how you treat your employees. It's how you grow. What are the different kinds of things that you're doing to impact your community? And so there are some folks that are out there with capital who are trying to sort of do some of those things. And there's a couple of innovative models, but yeah, I agree. I think that's really where a lot should be. A lot more money should be focused because
Yeah,
I really do think that that's an important space to um, for all of us to want, right? I want businesses that like care about their employees and want people to be healthy and want to have inclusive environments where,
mhm,
everyone is welcome and at the table and getting opportunities, right? Like I want that. So if you're telling me that when you invest in a company that gets thrown out of the window, like that's not okay for me, right? I want to make sure that they are also thinking about that versus just returning you cash back.
yeah. And I'm gonna even throw this out there. I'm gonna go on a limb and say, for those individuals who don't care about all that stuff and they care about just the investment, the money, and all that stuff, here's a kicker for you. If you invest in people like that and you care about diversity, equity, inclusion within that company, first, you're going to come out with a better product because you have diverse voices at the table that will improve and expand that product to the masses, which is going to get you those 10x returns. You're going to create a culture where people are just loving work and they're going to come up with, and they're not going to be stressed out, and they can come up with innovative ideas to grow and expand, create different tentacles and legs to the company that's going to create 10x growth. So it's kind of like, if that's what you want, you have to like lean into this because this will get you that. They kind of coexist together. At least
Yeah,
to me, I
I
feel that's
completely agree. And
good.
all of
Uh,
the statistics and the data and the years of research have sort of proven that companies that are more diverse, like over year, they produce better results, they produce better outcomes. They have longer time frames when people work there. A real hidden thing that no one kind of talks about that I think is an interesting thing is the amount that it costs when you have an environment and you have an employee specifically sort of diverse employees who are in companies who are really smart and who are able to do great work that leave because they don't feel like the environment is conducive to them and it doesn't support them or appreciate them, right? The amount of money
mm,
that companies have to spend to replace that kind of talent, uh, it's a lot.
yeah.
And I don't think anybody, well, I can't say anybody. There are a lot of people who are doing some great work in DE&I and trying to help some these companies do this, but that's a real thing. Like it's a real piece of people. And like, you know what? This ain't for me. I'm just leaving it. When they leave, all that institutional knowledge goes with them. All of that ingenuity
Hmm.
goes with them to the next company or place. Or a lot of people, they kind of start their own thing.
Yeah. And that's if they leave on like decent terms. If they
That's true.
leave on
That's
ugly
true.
terms, then lawyers get involved, and then so
Very true.
you
Yeah.
have to do all those settlements, and then you have to do the whole recruitment process to get somebody new, and you don't get the institutional knowledge, so
Yeah,
it's double
that's
the
very true.
cost. So yeah, there's a lot of yeah. So yeah, I'd be interested to see more conversations had around that and see what that space looks like. What do you think the space looks like specifically for people of color? Because I see more, since George Floyd, we see more initiatives happen for like people really donating time, money, energy, strength programs into people of color to get into the space. When you look at it from your lens, what do you see and what do you feel the future looks like for us in these different spaces?
So I think the initial sort of reaction from a lot of sort of whether it's big corporations, entities, philanthropic sort of areas, um, was a really good one. And I think for a lot of times it came from a genuine place. What I will say though is this isn't something that just started then. So the funds, the money, the programs have to have a lens and a longer lens than just 18, 24, 36 months. Like we didn't
Mm-hmm.
get to this point in 18, 24, 36 months. So like what are the initiatives that are going to be 10, 15, 20 years? And that's kind of a little bit of my concern, is that for some of these programs that launched, okay, and we come up in, because a lot of them are 3-year, 4-year, 5-year initiative. Like, are you going to re-up and give another 5 years, another 10 years to being able to make sure that it keeps going? That's my only kind of concern. Because again, I think that a lot of times it came from genuine places, but are they going to keep that same desire? Are they going to keep that same, willingness and wantingness to help when they're not under the microscope? Because it was, at that time, the temperature got turned up on a lot of companies, and they were like, wait a minute, we got to do something, because, there's a lot going on and people are demanding that we do stuff. But when that voice kinds of doesn't quiet down, but it isn't as sort of amplified in some of those circles, are you still as excited to be able to, provide those opportunities, provide those checks? And then the other piece where I think it's not just the money, it's also the knowledge and the connections. Because over time, you need a lot of money if you're going to sort of just use money as the catalyst to be able to do things. But really what people need is information, details. And so for companies that are interested in getting into the space, it is that, like, hey, okay, cool, you can cut a check, but how about you bring some of your engineers down and like really dig in and teach people how to do some of these things, and not just for one cycle? How about you make a 15-year commitment that we are committed to having our developers and our engineers and the people who to work with these high schools or with these early stage entrepreneurs, and it's going to be for the next 15 years, and we're just going to do it. That to me is where the real sort of change starts to happen for like legacy, like long term, because then you're dealing with generations and generations of people who are being able to get that information, those details, and that knowledge.
I love that. I love all of that. And as we would say in the Black community, for all through that, y'all that pledge, gave money, time, efforts, energy, keep that same energy 15 years, 20, 35, 45, 55 years from now. And it's going to be an ongoing process. We know it's not a perfect, but stay in community, stay in communication. If you need help, holla at your boy Alex. You can even holla at me. I'll introduce you to Alex if you don't got Alex's number, and we can work on something between me and him. I'm pretty sure we can. His philosophy brain, my EDI brain. I'm sure we can coordinate something.
Yeah, I mean that's the real thing, and I'm for anybody who hears this listening, like I want to make sure that we're able to do more. Like, what are the other programs? What are the other things? How do we sort of, continue to build and using the assets that already exist to then continue to move forward at the next level? And I told somebody this before. It's like, it's really important, me included. Like, nobody is beyond sort of reproach with things. So, like, if there's something that comes up, you're like, hey, man, you're not doing the thing that you said that you were doing. Like, the accountability piece is really important. And I think that everyone should, welcome it, right? Like, okay, what's going on? How are these things going? Well, you said you were doing this, but it didn't okay, how do we reset and make sure that we get on the right pathway sort of moving forward?
Yeah, love that. Love that. So let's wrap it up like this. I feel like you could talk forever, but, I try to keep these a drive time. So, or what used to be a drive time. What projects are you currently working on, and where can people find you?
Yeah, so currently I'm at the Jacob Center for Neighborhood Innovation, and we're working on our business accelerator program that we have there, in addition to our business resource center. And you can find out information at Connect All the Jacob Center, sd.org. But I think the next phase is like, okay, well, what is the 2.0 version of that? What is the next area that we're sort of moving into? And we're kind of working on some things and thinking about, well, what does it mean for us to be able to have our space, which we're on the second floor of the Jacob Center, be more of a community space. So for entrepreneurs to be coming in and working in different things, and organizations to be coming in and providing not only space, but really this, the term I read one time is called like these collisions, right? So when somebody who's working on something meets somebody else who's working on something, like a part of the secret sauce that happens, especially in tech, in areas that no one talks about, is it isn't just the individual that starts something and then immediately becomes a success. It's the actual engagement with other individuals that have tried 4 or 5 other things, and then collectively they come together and then they do the thing that hits it out of the ballpark, right? Because you have this sort of space where this energy is happening and there's a constant sort of influx. And it happens all over communities in a lot of different areas and spaces. But I really want to be able to make sure the Jacob Center is able to do that and is able to build that over time. I know we're coming out of kind of COVID, and we just talked about sort of some of the events and physical space and where people are. But as we sort of emerge a little bit from that, how do we make sure that those kinds of things are happening and occurring? Yeah, so that's really what we're working on. As we
I love that. I love that. And he's invited me to that space, and I hope to be in that space doing podcasts there in person and amplifying all the amazing work that's coming out of there, and do some crash course collision, whatever it would be for Rise Urban Nation and the folks that we tend to. I want to use a better word than clash, but I can't think of another one right now. Anyhow, Alex, my man, my brother, I appreciate you. I thank you. Thank you for coming on the show. Just wealth of knowledge. Such a humble dude, always willing to give, and I appreciate you for that. I applaud all the work that you're doing. For those who are listening, if you don't have his contact information, don't worry, I'm gonna get all the links from him and put it into the show notes. Any last words of wisdom for the people, Alex, before we head out?
Yeah. So I always do this anytime I'm here, and I really do mean like reach out. You can email me, awaters@jacobcenter.org, or you can call. I still have an old DC number. I never changed it back over for when I was living in DC for a while. 202-595-4216. You can
Oh
hit
wow,
me
you
up.
got the 202 number still. I switched over. I'm sorry.
I still got the 202 number. But yeah, but like I'm happy to chat with anybody about entrepreneurship or any of the things that I can help. And if I can't help, we can try to figure out what are different resources, or just being able to, share what information might be out there for people.
Awesome. I appreciate that. Alex Waters, ladies and gentlemen, this is another episode of Rise Urban Nation. Thanks for tuning in, and we look forward to seeing you on the next time.